Hey guys, Russ here with bishopswest.com. A little bit over a year ago, Eventide released the Split EQ plugin. And not long after that, I made a video showing how you could kind of approximate what they were doing with Bitwig's transient control device. So now Bitwig has upped the ante a little bit and released the Transient Split device. So I thought it would be fun to revisit the topic and show a little bit about what can be done with this new device. So first off, let's start by sticking to the original premise and trying to create a poor man's version of Split EQ. Last year I did this by splitting the audio into two paths using an FX layer and putting a transient control on each layer and then turning the gain down on either the attack or the sustain to try to isolate those. And then after that, just added an EQ plus to separately affect either the attack or the sustain. Looking at the new Transient Split device, that becomes a lot more streamlined because it allows you, using these FX bins, to affect separately either the attack or the tones, aka the sustain. So what I've done is, in the transients bin here, I've added an EQ plus, plus a bunch of other stuff. And then in the tones bin, I did the same thing, just added an EQ plus here. Once you've done that, you can solo or mute either one, the transients or the tones, and listen to what that sounds like. So let me deactivate this and let you listen just to the beat by itself. And then if I turn on the Transient Split with just the EQs engaged, this is what it sounds like. Not a whole lot of difference yet, but now let's just play with the transients a little bit. And play with the tones a little bit. So what's fun about that is in the tones, I can leave the transients as they are, but in the tones I can kind of take out a lot of that really low end stuff and leave it with a more of a kind of a knock bass. One thing I wanted to mention, and this is kind of off topic, but if you look at the EQ plus that I have in the transients bin, I've got this reference set to mixed drums, audio 2, split chains, tones. I'm able to reference the EQ that's in the tones bin so I can see what the difference is. So that's what that purple line there is. What's weird is, if I do the same thing in to the EQ plus in the tones bin, click on that, mix, drums, it doesn't let me do the same thing. It doesn't let me choose anything on this track at all. So I don't know why. It's kind of a weird little bug, I guess, if you want to call it a bug. But at least using this EQ plus, you can compare the two signals. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we do have a mix knob here, so you can kind of dial back the effect, almost like parallel transient splitting, I guess. So all the way from the original signal to how much of this affected signal you want to mix in. I'll leave it at 100% now since we're just playing with it. So since we've already achieved the basic functionality of what we did last year, let's cover some added functionality that adds to the power of this plugin. We've already talked about the mix knob, the transients and the tones bin and the solo buttons. We also have panning buttons. Which I find pretty interesting. And then we've also got these pre-FX and post-FX bins. These would be useful when saving a preset maybe, but I think the post-FX bin is interesting because whatever you add here should affect the transient split's output, but pre-mix knob. That means that you could add something like a compressor or a reverb to kind of glue the transients and tones together. But if you're doing something extreme, you can still determine how much you want in the mix. So let's add something, sure, like bit 8. Right, so you can add pretty extreme distortion or whatever else you want to do, but then really like parallel compression again, you can just decide how much you want in the mix. And then, you know, obviously if you solo one or the other. Becomes pretty trashy at that point. So that's kind of fun. So anyways, I'm going to disable this for right now. Just something to keep in the back of your mind. I'll turn the mix way back up. Now over on the left here, we have a lot more control than we used to. We've got the blend slider here, which allows us to go between full-on attack or full tones, whichever is needed. So if I play it. That kind of allows you to get whatever mix you need between the transients and the tones. And then we have the analysis bias slider. This kind of, according to the help file, it affects how the signal is analyzed, whether it focuses more on analyzing the transients or the tones. So let's just play with that a little bit to see if we can adjust how that sounds. And then the decay and smoothing settings can be used to fine-tune how your audio is being affected. Setting the decay setting higher holds the transients out longer, while smoothing changes the number of blocks in that channel as they decay. So conceptually, I think of this as affecting the resolution of the transient split. So let's do the decay first. See, so if you've got it up at like 125, it's almost including, well, depending on the signal, it's including a bunch of the tones in there. Or if you move it down to 1, it's really shortening how much attack is being allowed through. And then the smoothing. So it's kind of subtle, but you can hear a difference. Next up is the display style. If I click on this, it's got the sonogram style, which is pretty, but I'm more used to the waveform view, which is this one. And at least for me personally, I still find that more useful. Then finally, we have the tilt control up here. This is interesting because it determines whether the treble or the bass are more affected by the transient split. So this gives another level of control over the effect. Again, a little bit subtle, but you can kind of hear the difference. Of course, depending on what audio you're using, it's going to be a much bigger difference or a very slight difference, depending on what's coming through. The other interesting thing about that is over here on the left, if you change the tilt mode to contour, instead of affecting the highs or the lows, it's affecting the high and the lows together. So that allows you to emphasize or de-emphasize the mids. So let's try that. So that's kind of interesting too. Again, some of these are really subtle, but if you play with them, I think you can really get some very specific settings. So now that we've kind of explored the functionality, let's get to the fun stuff where, we started out talking about Eventide Split EQ and trying to emulate what they had done. Because it's part of Bitwig's ecosystem, I guess, you can really do a lot more with it than just focus on EQ. You can add whatever effects in here you want. So let's start by I've already got those on there because I was playing, but let's start with compression. And see if we can't get those transients to kind of come up a little bit. Right. Hopefully you can hear that difference. They're really poking through. Might be a little bit too much, but something, again, depending on your audio, but something to really play with and might make it a lot more useful than trying to compress the whole signal, including the tones. Another option would be to add just a delay. So let's do that first. That's interesting. What's nice about that is when you do that, it doesn't add the delay to the tones as much. And so it's not adding as much, I guess, mud to the mix. It's really just focusing on those delays. And depending on over here, what you have set for your decay, it can really just tighten up how much of these transients you're letting through to the delay. Another example, I guess, would be adding something like a bit crusher to the tones bin. So let's try that. We already did that in the post FX, but let's see what it sounds like just on the tones. again, that's really interesting. It adds a unique flavor, I guess, to the audio, but it keeps the transients really clean so they don't overwhelm as much. So maybe let's take some of this delay off just to focus on that. So that's the transient split device in a nutshell. I've kind of shown you what you can do with the drum loop with just a few basic effects, but try using this transient split on other types of audio as well. Any percussive or transient heavy audio should give some interesting results. I'm thinking of really like acoustic guitar, like a rhythm guitar would be fun, vocals, of course. And the thing is that we've had the ability to emphasize or de-emphasize transients for a while with various plugins, but it's never been this easy to isolate and put effects on the transients or the tones, whichever you want. So this feels a little bit like unexplored territory. I'm curious to see what your results have been. Have you tried different effects with the transient split that you really liked or that gave it a unique sound? So leave a comment below and share your results with the tribe. And finally, if you're just getting started with Bitwig Studio, I've created a free guide to accelerate your music making in Bitwig Studio. To download it, just go to bishopswest.com/Bitwig setup. And as always, thanks for watching. I hope you've been inspired to try something new. And if you have any questions or comments, please just leave them down below. And remember, be bold, be creative, and have fun.